remember where I was. Do you remember where you were when Mario hit that shot for KU? 2 minutes earlier, KU's down by 9, and I'm trying to coax my wife back into the living room because she can't stand to watch the end of a KU game where they're losing. So I'm trying to get her back into the house, into the room to watch the end of the KU-Memphis game. Now, I'm an Ohio State fan by birth, but I'm a KU fan by marriage. And earlier with KU down by a lot, with just 2 minutes left, Mario hit that shot. There was not thinking, what would be an appropriate response at this moment because Mario has hit that shot. There was not a thinking of, what should I do? There's a reaction, an immediate reaction. There was much joy in the Lehman house that night. And this session, as we're talking about the Holy Spirit, we're talking about our reactions to the Holy Spirit. So welcome to our Essential 50 passages on the Holy Spirit. This is simple, a low-key study. There's a 50-day Bible reading plan you can go along with. You text E50HS, E50 Holy Spirit, to 22828, and you can get signed up on that in your email. We'll have 4 sessions. This is session 2. We're just trying to grow deeper, and our goal is to have people, and not just pastors, talking about the Holy Spirit. So before we dig in, let's have a simple conversation icebreaker. Share with everybody in the room your first name, your last name, your high school and mascot that you attended. It's like Pittsburg Dragons. And what's a life event you remember your reaction to? The one I shared was Mario hitting the shot. What's a life event that you remember your reaction to? I'm 49 now, and over time, my reactions to the spiritual world have changed. How has your response to the spiritual world and spiritual things changed over your lifetime? When I was a kid, I kind of thought the spiritual world was magic, and that you just prayed and maybe God just made something happen for you. As I became a teenager, I treated the spiritual world and God more like a genie. Hey, I'm having trouble in this class. If you'll help me, I'll do this. And give me 3 wishes. As a college student, I treated the spiritual world more like a boss, like I was telling it what to do because I was being good. And as a young married person, starting to realize it a little bit differently. And today, I'm realizing the spiritual world is reality. It's more lasting than the physical world. How has your response to the spiritual world and spiritual things changed over your lifetime? How did you used to respond to the spiritual world? Over the last 5 years, 10 years? How has that changed? That's our next discussion question. It was May 19, 1985. My friend Ron had invited me to church. I hadn't been in church in years. I was sitting in service and there was some singing going on, and then there was a lull. And then it hit, boom. Somebody's shouting, not screaming, but they're shouting something that I couldn't understand. I asked my friend what's going on. He goes, shh, shh, shh. Then after this person was done shouting, there was another lull, and somebody else started shouting. This time they were shouting in English, not some language I didn't know. So again, I asked my friend what's going on, and my friend's going, quiet, 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 quiet. Later, I learned what this was. It was a Pentecostal church that I was in, and this was an expression of an utterance in speaking in tongues and the interpretation of those tongues, gifts of the Holy Spirit. That was my first encounter that I can recall. I don't think there was anything before that. But that was my first encounter that I can recall with anything to do with people expressing any kinds of gifts of the Holy Spirit. I was 18. What were some of your first encounters with other people as they were expressing the gifts of the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues? What was the setting? How old were you? And we're not judging these experiences right now. We're just simply sharing them. I've had all sorts of experiences with other people being using the gifts of the Spirit and some just doing their own thing. So, simple question, what were your first experiences? We're not judging them, just sharing them. Let's take a few moments and do that. In a recent message, we looked over Acts chapter 2 and we realized how people responded on the day of Pentecost. Some were confused, some were curious, some were critical, some were careless. I've traveled all over those 4 parts of that journey about the Holy Spirit in my life. It's kind of like a big square. Here we go, square, where you start in the center there. First I started walking with Christ. I was confused and clueless about the Holy Spirit. I shared with you about my first encounter. And then I was curious and interested about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. I sought out any and all experiences that I could get to, and that led me to seeing and doing some goofy things. And then because of that, maybe, I became critical and condemning of people who didn't practice this like I thought it should be. And what I was having in my heart may have been a hunger for the gifts of the Spirit, but it surely wasn't bearing any of the fruit of the Spirit. And that led me to where I feel like I was going where I didn't want to be, which was being careless and callous about the work of the Holy Spirit and saying, well, we don't need some of that. That's just going to make things messy. And now I find myself again, fresh and anew, seeking more of the Holy Spirit in every area of my life, allowing grace for those who may operate differently than what I think or what I'm comfortable with. And that's been my journey. The same way many people journey in their reactions to the Holy Spirit in Acts chapter 2. That's been my journey. What's been your journey with the Holy Spirit? How has your response to the Holy Spirit moved along this spectrum of confused, curious, critical, and careless over the past 5 or 10 years? And what is it you think that's actually moved you that way? Let's discuss that for a few moments. In a book that Jim Cymbala wrote, it's called Fresh Wind and Fresh Fire, he has a quote in there that has stuck with me. It says this: I don't want my life to be explainable without the Holy Spirit. I don't want my life to be explainable without the Holy Spirit. This is living a life that's beyond just being faithful, beyond just giving of time and resources, beyond just serving my community or my local church, but a life that's unexplainable without inserting the Holy Spirit there. I've heard people say before, don't have a funeral for me, man. There's no reason to cry for me. And those people, though probably well-meaning, are obviously missing the point, because the funeral service, the memorial service, is not for those who've deceased. The funeral service is for those who are still behind. However, my experience as a minister has been the deceased, the person in the casket, will have more influence at that funeral than any person who's speaking at that funeral. Ask yourself, what am I going to leave behind? Hope I leave behind clarity. What will my life's journey say about me? And what will my life's journey say about my God? When people talk about me afterwards, and when they speak of me and they speak of my life, I don't want my life to be explainable without having to mention the Holy Spirit. Am I living my life in such a way that I'm relying on His presence and His power? Or am I just being a good person, doing good things, and serving a good God? What do you want said about you spiritually at your funeral? How will you give the Holy Spirit more space in your life? Let's take some time and open up and see how the Holy Spirit might move in our life as we discuss these options.